Hello. Well, this is a reshoot of a video that I did with the hashtag of the formative decks and what decks would I immediately order if they were to disappear. If I was to wake up one morning, and they're all gone. I'm doing these two hashtags together because they go hand in hand. The decks that are formative are some decks that I feel are still influential for me and that I would, if at all possible, try to reorder or try to reclaim them somehow and bring them back into my practice. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to point out which decks I feel are the ones that I would replace and which ones are formative. They're both one the same, but there are some decks that I cannot, like, I wouldn't mind reordering them. It wouldn't be a loss to me. So with that being said, let's get started. My very first deck that got me into the tarot, which is like no surprise, is the Rider-Waite-Smith. And I do not remember the year that I got this particular deck. I had a divinatory deck when I was a teenager, just to kind of explore and see what divination was all about. That was around the time that I was also working with, trying to connect with a Ouija board, and it didn't work. So obviously I wasn't ready to work with those tools just yet. I knew there was an interest. I knew there was something of the unknown that I really wanted to tap into, but I didn't have those skills, I felt, at that time. So during my college years, a time where you're going through so many changes and shifts, I got my first tarot deck. And this is the original one. It's about, I think it's almost 30 years old. And it came in a yellow box. I'm not certain which edition this is. Oops. The little white book, I think, says 1970, but I think that was the first initial release of that deck, I think. So I keep it in a silk cloth, which is even older than the deck. And it was a cloth that my mom used to wear, and she gave it to me, and she's no longer with us, but I wrap it in this deck to hold her honor. So we have this wonderful box that I will keep the Rider-Waite-Smith in. I got this box many decades ago, and it was the only one at the store that I bought it from, and I wanted to go back and see if they had more, and they didn't. I got this for like $7. And now people are customizing these wood boxes. They're beautiful. So my first deck was the Rider-Waite-Smith. Very influential. It also came at a time where I took a personal loss and trying to understand my feelings, who I am as a person, and emotionally how everything was sort of happening the way that it was. I was questioning a lot of things, like the existence of humanity and, why did this happen, all of that. And I had a book, or I still have it. This was my first tarot book, I guess you could say, to help me get a better understanding of working with the tarot. And it's the Tarot for Yourself by Mary Kay Greer. And sorry for the lean in. This is the, I don't know what edition this is. I got it used for about under $8. And I went through it, not all of it, because there's some graphs that you can use to monitor and follow your life chart. But this really gave a nice variety of perspectives to work with the tarot, and this just worked for me. It takes it from the perspective of with astrology, the tree of life, elements, crystals, how to work with all those tools and to use it to deepen your practice. But for me, I didn't use all of those aspects. I focused primarily on the meanings and the different ways that you can look into the major and minor arcana. So I thank Mary Kay Greer for this book. And I still have it, as you could tell. I took some notes outside of the book. At the time, I wasn't writing into books very much, but this is definitely very influential for me. So the RWS deck and the Tarot for Yourself book by Mary Kay Greer, very formative for me. So I had the Rider-Waite-Smith deck for quite some time. And once I became comfortable with it and doing readings with it, I felt that it was time for me to move on. That I really needed to grow from that deck and explore some other decks. And I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and there's a bookstore called the Bodhi Tree Bookstore. It was the place that you would go to for workshops, for speakers, tarot, metaphysical, spiritual, self-healing, all of that. And there was a used bookstore behind it, a used version of the Bodhi Tree Bookstore. And I would spend at least a few times out of the month looking through all the books and decks. So I went to that store to follow up with the Rider-Waite-Smith deck and start looking. This is before the internet. And well, the internet was there, but before we had such a large community. And I started looking for decks. And the Eclectic Tarot website was, I think, just a few years old at the time, maybe not even that. And they posted reviews of decks. And I looked at that website, and I found a deck that I was very excited about because it moved me from the very basic visual meanings of the RWS. That was very traditional, very classic. And I wanted to move with a deck that had static energy, things that were moving. It was vibrant. And I came across, I think this is Ciro Marchetti. I think this could have been, I think he already had a previous deck. I don't think this was his first deck, but this is the deck that I got. And I like the energy, the colors. This edition, I believe I got in 2001. And I've seen a few comments online about this deck for people who have this deck, and they think it's kind of, it's a little bit too much. This is a little bit too garish with the colors and the imagery. But this deck was a long influence for me, following up from the Rider-Waite-Smith. This deck I've retired out from doing readings because I had it for such a long time, and the same with the RWS. I don't read with the RWS anymore. I retired out the Gilded Tarot because it was during a time in my 30s where there's a lot of self-exploration. And I really, this deck held a lot of energy for me. And I did a few readings with some other people using this deck, but it wasn't the same. It wasn't the same. So I'm just going to show a few cards from this. Got the King of Pentacles. Let's see if I have this in order. I do. So this is actually backwards. So it's very, very dreamlike. The colors, like I said, are vibrant. These are the backs of the cards. So I like that. So we go from the traditional aspects of the Rider-Waite-Smith into something that has a different feel for it. And I had this deck, or I still have it. I was working with this deck for over 10 years. And it got me through a lot of shifts that I was going through. I was using this deck when I was starting my yoga practice and discovering a different side of my spiritual self through yoga and working with this deck. So the Gilded Tarot, almost 10 years I had this deck. And then I took a break. I took a break from the tarot. I got busy with work and being more active and focusing more on my yoga practice, interesting enough, and less with the tarot. Yoga became a very important part of my journey. And so I was really focused on that. Every now and then I would go to pull a card, but the tarot was not speaking to me at that time. And of yoga's influence about finding the true self and working with asana and discovering that side of me and at a higher spiritual realm moved me in a greater way. And I felt that all the information, all the guidance I needed was through asana and through reading certain books and different philosophies about the yoga practice and building a spiritual path. So I stopped for a while. And it wasn't until probably the last 4 to 5 years, in that time, in that 10 years I took a break, I did a lot of moving around and whatnot. But when I moved out of LA to where I am right now, I live in a place that's tranquil. I'm surrounded by nature. It's very healing. And things started opening up for me. And I started feeling that connection to myself of like healing again, because I stopped my spiritual practice for a while. And then just being in this place of stillness and feeling how my heart and my emotions are, and thinking and seeing how my mind is working and how it's seeing things, I slowly started to get a distant calling, if you will, to going back to the tarot. And so with that long break, I had to catch up and see what was going on. And I realized when it was time for me to start looking for some decks to work with, that there was a large tarot community. There was such an explosion of creators and decks that it was such a flood for me to see. But in that time, I was able to maneuver through some of the decks I've seen on social media and find the ones that really speak to me. So these decks that I will be sharing with you are the ones that really catapulted my metaphysical practice to where it is to this day. And it's still going to be growing. It's going to be a long journey. So, and I welcome it. So the very first deck, now, in regards for decks that I would buy immediately, if they were to disappear, I would be okay for missing the Rider-Waite-Smith. I would be okay for missing the Gilded Tarot, because I felt like I've gone and experience everything that I needed with those two particular decks. So those are two decks that I wouldn't reorder, but they are formative. They are very important to beginning my my practice with the tarot. So the very first deck that I found that really called to me, it's not really a formative deck, because this would be a deck that I would reorder, but the reason why this particular deck isn't a formative deck is it was just a deck that I needed to get me back into my game, if you will, in the tarot. And that is Inner Hues Lamina Tarot. This is the back of the cards. And when I saw this, it infuses, to me, this is a tribal, primal energy deck for me. That's the best way I can explore it. It works with energy of nature, working within ourselves. This is a deck that I think, I almost want to say it's probably like 60-40. Like 40% of it has human depictions, and the rest of it's either pips. There's a Hierophant. Subtle references to the RWS. But when I saw this deck, I loved it because it almost picks up where it left off with the Gilded Tarot. It has vibrancy, it has movement. I feel the representation of the suits, the swords, cups, wands, and pentacles are nicely put together. I know there are some people who didn't take kindly to this deck because of the nature of the humans that were being represented. The humans in this deck were being seen as no diversity. They're thin. They look fashionable. They look kind of trendy. And I didn't see that. And I explained to people that when I get a deck, I go by the energy. Okay. Yes, I see a person here sitting, well dressed, but it's the energy that I feel first off. And the Lamina Tarot was that deck that just moved me, very similar to the Gilded Tarot, but taking like an updated approach with this deck. So I use this deck primarily for my readings because it crosses over. It could cross over to people who are contemporary. They can relate to some of the images. It can relate to also spiritually. It can relate to all the different elements. Though I feel this deck leans a little bit more with the earthy aspects, but the Lamina Tarot was the deck that got me back into my practice. I'm not going to say this is a formative deck, but I would say this is a deck that I would like to reorder because I like the way it feels. It works very nicely for me. So the Lamina Tarot. And then I have to think about the order of how all my decks came together. After that, because of where I'm living right now, I'm surrounded by nature and animals. I was starting to build an affinity to connecting with animal spirit energy. At the time, I didn't have an animal companion, so to see crows, eagles, deer, bear, raccoons, squirrels, and all of these animals I see here, I wanted to connect to that energy because I used to live in the city and this was so different. So I was looking for a deck that that had that influence. And at the time that I was looking, Kim Krans had already created the Wild Unknown Tarot, and I looked at that deck and I didn't like it. It just didn't connect to me. But her Oracle deck, Animal Spirit Oracle deck, did. And it's very simple. There's no storyline that we're seeing in this deck. It's focused completely on the animal spirit and its energy. With, of course, Kim Kranz's artistic illustration. And I like this. This is a deck that just works very nicely for me. And I will probably work with this deck with another deck that I have over here that I'm going to show you. I haven't worked with the animal spirit in a while because I feel, or any deck that has nature elements or animal representation in it. And I realize that it's something seasonally. We are now in spring, so I'm feeling my calling to work with animal spirit energy is stronger. And during our fall, winter months, I wasn't being called to it because animals are starting to go into hibernation. They're starting to settle down for the season, for the winter, until spring comes. So I'm not feeling that energy. I guess I could feel the energy, but I need to see it. And during the winter months, I'm not seeing, I see squirrels, the raccoons, maybe every now and then, but all the other animals, birds on the occasion, I don't see. So I don't feel that calling. So I really wasn't working with any animal influenced, nature influenced decks. And that's when I realized that's what it is. They're all in hibernation. But now, since we're going to our spring season, I'm feeling that calling with the flowers, So I have an oracle deck for animal energy work. Then I wanted to find a deck that I could work with tarot-wise that incorporated animals and nature. Now, I was considering the Wildwood Tarot because that is very popular with quite a few readers, and it is a beautiful deck. And I'm still on the fence about it. It brings in different traditions into the deck, which is not a problem. But again, I need to feel that connection to the deck. Maybe not now, but I feel later on. So going through YouTube and looking at decks, typing in animal-inspired decks, nature-inspired decks, I came across a video where a woman was talking about a particular deck that I had never heard of, and it's called the Nature Spirit Tarot. And this is the self-published edition. This deck has been republished. It came out a few months ago, 2 months ago, and it's the smaller standard size edition. The packaging's slightly different, but from what I've seen on recent videos of this deck, it's still keeping in line with the images. This deck is created by Jean Marie Herzel. The first edition, self-published, came out in 2014. These cards are 4x6, I think. They're like postcard size. This is the back. And I saw the video, and I go, this is the deck. This is the deck. Now, it doesn't have so much animals. It has birds. It has some insects. It also incorporates flora, crystals to represent some of the different energies of the suits. But my God, this was just stunning. And I was looking online. I couldn't find the deck, but I found the website of Jean Herzel. And I contacted her and said, hey, I would like to order this deck. And she said that, I guess because the way she's contracted with her publisher, that she couldn't sell any of her original decks. So she mailed me one. She mailed me this deck as a gift. And this is a deck I could reorder. I'm not going to get the same size if this version was to disappear. But this is a deck I would hands down immediately reorder. And I'm thinking about getting the smaller size edition of this deck. So the Nature Spirit Tarot, the title says it all. It's working with the energies of nature through the different elements and the creatures that are represented, creatures of the water, the air, earth, and fire. And the book has a little bit of color into it, but it's a beautiful deck. So this is not a formative deck, but this is a deck that I would reorder. And it's something very easy for me to read into. When I received the deck and I opened it, I was just like, oh yes, this is a wonderful deck. So this is the original version. And then you can order the second edition. Oh, I cannot remember the name of the company. You do a search and you'll find it. Nature Spirit Tarot by Jean Marie Herzel. So the Animal Spirit deck, this one, and this one here, Nature Spirit Tarot, they are decks that are very important for my growing and connecting with animal energy. So again, the Animal Spirit, probably wouldn't order, but I would say it's formative because this is the first deck that I embraced to work with animal energy. So I would more than likely order that one, have that one back. The Nature Spirit Tarot, definitely hands down. I would bring back that deck into my collection. So from animal energy, I needed to find, I have a little bit of everything with the decks that I work with because I like it. I like the energy to focus on certain aspects of my practice. So I would say the next deck that I got, I also have to put a mention. I have to put an honorable mention to the Thoth Tarot because the Thoth Tarot was sort of squeezed in after the Dreams of Gaia. And I did have the Thoth Tarot. And at the time, I was just, this is incredible. This a different way of practicing the tarot. So I started a self-study with the Thoth, and I have the Understanding of Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot book by Duquette, which really helped put things into a better understanding. And Lon has a sense of humor that he puts into the book about understanding Aleister Crowley. So it made working with the Thoth Tarot a lot of fun. But I realized when I got the Thoth and I started going through some of the suits that this is its own system, obviously, and this is an ongoing practice. And I said, okay, let's do it. Let me go through each of the cards. I didn't even finish the entire deck. I got probably partway into the major arcana, and then I put the deck away. Because I got sidetracked with responsibilities. Not sidetracked, but I had to take care of responsibilities. I put the deck away, and I came across the deck a few years ago. I found it. It was packed somewhere. I was like, okay, let's open this deck again. And it wasn't the same. It didn't speak to me. I left it out on the table and I looked at some of the cards and it was different. And the last time I picked up that Thoth tarot was at least 10 years ago. So obviously I've shifted and changed and whatnot. So to do this VR about formative decks, it's interesting because I lay out these decks and I see the growth, I see the experience that I've gained. So I want to do an honorable mention for a formative deck as the Thoth Tarot because it did help me take a different system, different perspective in working with the tarot. So I no longer have the Thoth. I gifted that to someone, and I replaced the Thoth with a deck that I'm going to share with you in a moment. But I want to back up here a little bit because I'm doing this in order. So the next deck that I got, I want to explore the dream realm, the subconscious, higher level of consciousness. So I came across the DreamKeepers tarot. I had already moved from Los Angeles, and I made a trip there, and I came across Liz Huston, who's the creator of the DreamKeepers tarot. I came across her studio at the last bookstore in downtown Los Angeles, and I didn't know anything about her. I just went into her shop, and I saw she had a tarot deck, and I saw the images. Here's the back of it. I saw the images. It's like, wow, this is really surreal. This really taps into those underlying layers that we don't see. It's very dreamy. It's very ethereal, very surreal. It's kind of hard to see, but. And what I like about most of the cards in here is that we see the human form, but broken up into pieces, dissected, and getting into these layers that we don't see. Here we have the star, the moon. We see the merging of a skeletal form with a human form. And I go, this is the deck that I can work with to do dream work and subconscious work. And I had missed the Kickstarter, but I was able to purchase the second edition that she did. There is a mass-produced edition of the DreamKeepers. I think it's through US Games that you can get. But this deck, DreamKeepers Tarot by Liz Huston, I felt was this is a formative deck that I can work with for doing dream work. The other deck that I have 2 editions of this. Now this deck is more of it has a lot of vibrational energy, high vibrational energy. It's very cosmic. It's very, I can't even explain the best way. It taps into chakra energy. I'll just get to it. It's the Dreams of Gaia tarot. Now this is the second. No, this is the first one that I got. I got the pocket edition, and it was redesigned. So these are the back of the cards. I call this my pint-sized deck. The standard edition is larger. It's larger than a regular tarot-sized card. But these I love. Imagery is the same from this version of the deck, except the quality. This is all matte. I'll show you the back of the cards again so you can see. But this is just beautiful for me. And the Dreams of Gaia works through the different stages of life. So there really isn't a major arcana with this deck, but we start seeing the growth of the individual and the energy. And we see a little bit of similarity. Like here we have the Empress. But the numbers don't correspond, like we know with the RWS, to the major arcana. Like 5 would be the Hierophant, and this would be more related to the Emperor. So this deck goes through the different stages of life. And there's, I think, let me see how many. There are 24. And I'll show you this last card. This deck for me is formative. This deck for me is the deck that I will reorder because it is a healing deck for me. It's a nurturing deck for me. It has a wonderful sense of connecting with all the elements. This deck uses the elements. It doesn't work with the suits of cups and swords. This is the element of air. And also I like because it has a dreamy feel to it. This is so stunning. And it hits the core of the individual when doing a reading. I use the Dreams of Gaia with the premise for people who are looking to heal from something either traumatic or trying to get spiritual insight. This is the deck that I work with for that and for guidance of healing. So the Dreams of Gaia, this again, standard size, or I'm sorry, the mini size, and then the standard size, just this. The backs are different on the larger edition. This is by Ravynne Phelan. And formative, and I would reorder if it's available, if that deck was to disappear. So the Dreams of Gaia and DreamKeepers Tarot, working with the subconscious, the dream realm, healing through our dreams, working with the elemental energy, connecting to that higher level, cosmic, our cosmic higher self, Dreams of Gaia. These two decks I could probably work with. And actually, no, I can't. I really can't, because the dream realm influence of the DreamKeepers is quite different. I could probably do a few cards, but not a full reading with it. And okay, and then from there, I started exploring moon energy. And I wanted to connect working with that side of a spiritual practice. So we have our sun, our sun signs, which is more of our external side, and then the moon side is more of our intuitive spiritual side. So it only made sense to start seeing if there were any decks out there. Of course, there's a deck called Moonology, but in my journey, I came across this, the Moon Oracle deck by Carolyn Smith and John Astrop. This is a formative deck, and this is a deck that I would have to reorder if it was to disappear. I'm going to just show one card from it because I have a layout with this deck right now. It's one of the cards from the deck. And this is our new moon phase that we're in. Slowly waxing, but this is our new moon in Taurus at the time of me recording this. Decks are pretty straightforward, or the backs are. This deck is broken up, the Moon Oracle deck. I'm going to go really closely here so you could see. You could do readings where you're going through all the 4 elements and the phases of the moon in relation to their signs. As you know, our signs, our sun signs are held with elements: fire, air, earth, and water. So we can do readings through the phases of the moon and the signs that they're placed in and their elemental influence. We have the moon mansions. There's 28, and those 28 moon mansions circumnavigate for the entire year. There's like 3 cards for each astrological month, but it's using the placement of the sign, the sign where the moon is in the phase. So there's 3 of these, and there's planetary associations with it. And then there's goddesses. The goddesses are associated with the seasons. There's 12 of those. So this deck was more than I could imagine. So I use this deck primarily to discuss moon work. And when I do my Mystic Moon Mondays twice a month, that's the deck I reach to. So formative, and I would have to reorder again. And I highly recommend it. Everything is very symbolic with the imagery. And it's the designs of the crescent of the phases of the moon are mandala-like. There's a lot of movement. I will show you here. There's just a lot of energy. Okay, this is new moon, so there's not too much, but it's a deck that works with me. You've probably been listening me say quite a few times energy. And again, that's what really draws me to a deck. I really need to feel that connection. I need to feel movement. And that movement I can transfer into readings. That movement is speaking to me from the cards. So then from there, the Moon Oracle deck, because it does infuse astrology a little bit, it started piquing my interest in bringing astrology into the tarot. Now, the Thoth Tarot did that with the decans, the Golden Dawn correspondences. So that was a wonderful introduction to see how the signs and their placement for each astrological month and the minor arcana card of influence, how that can really enhance a reading. But like I said, at the time that I had the Thoth, I really wasn't focusing on the astrology. I was just focusing more on the meaning with the Thoth Tarot. So the Moon Oracle revisit that astrological curiosity. And I started looking for decks that may have astrological influences in it. And there are quite a few, but the deck that I came across first blew my mind. And this deck that I'm going to show you replaced the Thoth Tarot for me. Okay, there are 2 different systems, but the Tarot of the Holy Light does incorporate, this is by Payne Towler, does incorporate Hermeticism, the Tree of Life, astrology, but this is like before traditional astrology. So the placements of the signs with the planets, I'll just pull a card from here, is different. The astrological associations with some of these cards are different. I'll show you really quickly what I mean. For instance, okay, this is the Sun card. And if you notice right there on the bottom, it's associated with Pisces. And this is a study deck for me because of how different it is from the RWS. I want to get an understanding why some of these signs were placed differently with the major arcana and within the minor arcana, why planets that we would normally see in the Golden Dawn system is different. And there's the guidebook that goes with this deck, which is about 400 pages. This is formative. This is a deck that I would have to reorder immediately. It takes a very philosophical approach to the tarot. And also, it takes a perspective of self-study, how we interact with ourselves and with other people under different circumstances with these influences. It also has alchemy references to it. So it's a little bit of everything. And this is what I was looking for when it came to a deck that incorporated astrology, but a little bit more. So that's my prize deck. But to take an extension and focus more on the astrology, I came across this deck, Unified Esoteric Tarot, which I've made mention to a few times, by Attila Blaga. And he was saying to me, he spent over 2 decades trying to build a system, his own system, for interpreting the elements, astrological signs. This is his deck. Very simple. We see the relationship with the planets within the elements and the signs. Here's something that's different too. We have Virgo associated with the High Priestess, not the Hermit. Capricorn is with the Hierophant. With some people, they may not appreciate this because if you're still trying to get a grasp of the tarot and maybe some of the basics of astrology, and you get your hands on a deck like this, of course, it's going to be confusing. But for me, the beauty of these 2 decks, the Unified Esoteric Tarot and the Tarot of the Holy Light, is that we're taking 2 different perspectives. We're seeing why both creators, Attila and Christine Payne Towler, created the correspondences the way that they did. Now, with the UET deck, there's not a guidebook. There is Attila's website where he's written numerous articles, but he was saying to me, because he's in Europe, I think he's in Romania, his English isn't good, and he mentioned that it was a struggle to write a book in English and to translate his philosophy and perspective and the meanings of these decks from his language into English, let alone some other languages. It sounds like he will be working on a book, hopefully, down the line, but I think he had a digital download of it and it's no longer available. So anyhow, the Unified Esoteric Tarot, though, is set up in such a way that I think for someone who wants to learn astrology and infuse it into the tarot, it's pretty straightforward. Again, the cards, it's almost like a study deck in itself. It tells you, Here's the court card. Here we have the Queen of Swords, but in Aquarius. Queen of Swords is seen as in the sign of Libra. So we see different interpretations of this, but everything's written right there. So I think if you were to study with this deck, you can easily do it, but it's coming from a different perspective. Okay, so my last few decks, these are the most recent decks. Not most recent, but one of the last few decks that I purchased last year. These are formative, and these are decks that both of these decks that I would have to reorder. So during the fall season, fall seems to be the season where my practice just seems to amplify. And I think it's because we are in the waning stage of our season where we're getting less light. Our days are getting shorter. We're getting ready for Samhain and all the holidays that are coming up, Yule. And during the week of Samhain, or during the month of Samhain in October, I wanted to just find a deck that explored a little bit more of the craft, witchcraft, pagan influences. And there's quite a few decks there. There's a Halloween Oracle and some other decks that are not coming to mind. So I went online. It's like, okay, let me find a deck that can really resonate with me for this time of the year, where for a lot of people the veil is the thinnest to connect to ancestors and to connect to those who have passed on. And I came across a deck on Kasia's Tarot Maps YouTube's channel, where she showed a deck called the Wicca deck. And that deck is no longer in print, and I really liked it. It really showed the influence of working with the tools from the craft, how to connect with Mother Nature spiritually, and the imagery was just nice for me. But the deck wasn't being produced anymore, so I was doing some searching, and I came across this deck, The Witch's Oracle by Sally Morningstar. And there were some pictures of it. I was like, wait a second, that looks like the deck that Kasia was showcasing on her channel, the Wicca deck. And indeed it is. So it was re-released, I think, in 2019. But it was repackaged and renamed to the Witch's Oracle. And this deck is smaller. I think the original Wicca deck was larger. And the packaging, too, was different. So this is the Witch's Oracle. I love it. It's the imagery is sort of 1970s like. The illustration, we have the wizard. How to work with the wand energy. And these are the backs, the pentacles. Slightly the downside to this deck is that it is glossy, and also I don't riffle shuffle, but so far with me shuffling, the edges have taken a beating. So they do wear down. I will show you this card here, as you could see. So it's starting to wear down. But since this is a re-edition, a republication of the Witch's Oracle, or of the Wicca deck, I would definitely reorder this again. And this is one of my favorite cards. It's come up a few times. Broomstick, witches in it. It just was a pleasant surprise. System deck. So from the Fool, we see the Pilgrim. The Magician, there's a card here that's called Initiation, so that's representing the second card in relation to the Rider-Waite-Smith. These are the backs. The Wheel of Life card. So these two decks, the Witch's Oracle and Witch's Wisdom, these were my Samhain discoveries of last year, and really, really helped build a different side of my practice that I think I was searching for. And these cards have spoken volumes. So I read the Witch's Wisdom Tarot and the Witch's Oracle together at times. There's enough information I could pull from the